Greetings Battle Brothers. Today we're going to compare Bladeguard Veterans with both Lightning Claws and Thunderhammer Terminators. I had loads of comments last week asking me to look at these guys next, so in this video we'll compare the 6 main stat points between each units, then we'll take the Mathhammer one step further because you guys really enjoyed that last week. If we're just meeting, I'm John, the Blood Angels Commander. Welcome to the weekly tactics video. On this channel we have one focus, the Sons of Sanguinius. So if you'd like to see more content on a weekly basis, please consider subscribing. Normally when we compare units we look at one weapon type. However, in this video we'll look at the option to upgrade the Sergeant of the Bladeguard Veterans, and we'll also look at both options with the Terminators because I think both are valid in different situations. So this should give us a really clear picture of which units perform best and how expensive they are in points. So as always, we'll start with some lower, then we'll do the comparison points, then we'll jump into the Mathhammer, and if you want to skip ahead, then I've marked the timeline appropriately. Terminator Assault Squads eschew ranged firepower in favour of dedicated close combat weaponry. Unsurprisingly, this option is highly popular with the aggressively tempered Blood Angels. Some Terminators choose to wield a pair of Lightning Claws, ceramite gauntlets fitted with energised talons that can swiftly rip any foe to pieces. Others carry massive Thunderhammers, bludgeoning their foes to ruin from behind the armoured bulwark of their towering storm shields. The matchless combination of protection and offensive might presented by Terminator armour is fearsome enough. However, it is the warrior inside that is by far the most deadly component. Only the most accomplished of the Blood Angels First Company veterans are ever given the honour of wearing a suit of Terminator armour. And nowhere is this wealth of heroism and battle experience better deployed than when put in control of a suit of tactical dreadnought armour. The Bladeguard go to war covered in purity seals and in finely crafted armour, bedecked with icons of victory and heraldic devices. Their towering storm shields are the work of many generations of toiling chapter serfs, and their powerful force fields are said to protect the bearer's soul as much as his flesh. This war gear is brought out of the chapter reliquaries in the time of war, and when seen on the battlefield it reminds all brothers of the legacy they have sworn to uphold since their induction into the chapter. Bladeguard veterans are inexorable warriors, advancing relentlessly with blades held high. They're the image of noble knights of myth. So Bladeguard Veterans are a new model that joined the Battle for Warhammer 40,000 in the 9th edition. They're part of the Primaris range, so they keep that sort of 6-inch move that's normal for Primaris units. They come in squads of 3 to 6, and then I think you'll see for 35 points a model, they're actually very competitive. The Assault Terminators obviously have 2 weapon loadouts. We have the Lightning Claws version that comes in at 33 points per model, and we have the Storm Shield Thunderhammer version that comes in at 43 points per model. With the Terminators you can pay an additional 5 points to take that Teleport Homer. Terminators and the Assault Terminators kind of saw a bunch of buffs in the 9th edition. The first 2 were the additional wound and then the Teleport Homer allowing the redeployment mid-battle. If you want to see a little bit more on them, you can check out last week's video where I talk about them just here, and then you can watch that and then come back and finish this video after. So the other big change for Terminators is the buff to Lightning Claws. Now each Lightning Claw adds 1 additional attack. So if you think about Terminators, 2 attacks, 3 in the charge, 2 more Lightning Claws, that's 5 attacks. If we go to Savage Echoes, that's 6 attacks for the regular guys, 7 for the Sergeant. You're looking at 31 attacks, re-rolling all wounds. So in terms of deleting 1 wound infantry models off the board, then I think Lightning Claws are very much unparalleled. People have asked in the comments, do I think Lightning Claw Vanguard Veterans are an option? I would say yes, very much so. Thunderhammer and Storm Shields had very small changes. We'll cover them in a little bit. So if we talk about movement, the Terminator only moves 5 compared to the Bladeguard 6, but that 1 inch is really negated by the fact that he can teleport strike into battle 9 inches away from the enemy, setting us up for an 8-inch charge as a Blood Angels player. So the Bladeguard, toughness 4, 3 wounds per model, 3+ save, but as they carry the Storm Shield that becomes a 2+ save with a 4+ invulnerable save. So when we look at the Terminators in terms of survivability, the wounds and the toughness are the same as the Bladeguard. Toughness 4, wounds 3. If we're armed with Lightning Claws, then we save on a 2, and we save invulnerable on a 5+, so it's 1 worse. If we're armed with a Thunderhammer and Storm Shield, then we actually save on a 1+, and then a 4+ on the invulnerable save. So what the 1+ actually means that Terminators armed with Storm Shields can ignore -1 AP. So -1 AP would still be saved on a 2. As we go through the video, you'll actually see this is very situational. It only affects -1 and -2 AP weapons. So -1 AP weapons would be saved on a 2, -2 AP weapons would be saved on a 3. Any other weapon configuration has no discernible change, right? Anything more than that, you're still using your vulnerable save. Anything less, so AP 0, you're still using your 2+ save. While I really like the points cost and the survivability of the Bladeguard Veterans, we're going to test it all out in Section 7 in the Mathhammer, so make sure you stick around for that. So in terms of shooting this week, this is kind of the easiest comparison ever. The Assault Terminators, I checked the profile because I wasn't sure, they have no weapons, not even grenades, so they have nothing. So for the Bladeguard, the Sergeant is going to be allowed to take a plasma pistol or a neo-volkite pistol. The kit's not out, but I imagine it's going up for pre-order very soon. If you watch any of my videos, you'll know that I hate plasma pistols. They're so unreliable, I think they're all overcosted. You never want to fire it on high power because you can potentially lose a model for, you know, a 1 roll. So take the neo-volkite pistol. It's strength 5, it's 2 shots, it's 2 damage, and wound rolls of 6 cause a mortal wound. It is 0 AP, but I mean realistically as a Blood Angel player you're rushing towards Assault Doctrine, so I would almost say that's fine. It'll be -1 for most of the game, so spend the 5 points, take the neo-volkite pistol, and I guess the Bladeguards edge out the Terminators in terms of shooting. So here's where it gets fun for Blood Angels. Bladeguard Veterans, squad of 3 charging, is 13 attacks, hitting on 3s, and then strength 5, 2 damage, mastercrafted power swords, -3, and really you're going to be wounding most other infantry on 2s, and maybe you're going to be wounding armour on like 4s due to the +1 from the Red Thirst. Very easy to see this unit do like 10+ damage with just 3 guys. So, Terminator squads. If we look at Lightning Claws guys first, what's really interesting I found with this is with the new additional attacks Lightning Claws guys will get, they actually end up the identical to an Assault Intercessor squad once the Assault Intercessor squad has Savage Echoes, right? So if you think, if you've played 9th edition and you've had an Assault Intercessor squad, in turn 3 or above, a full squad of 5, and they charge, you get 26 attacks, it's -2 because the chainsword gets the -1, and then, you know, you hit on 3s, and I guess other infantry usually like wound on 3s, right, because the +1 from Red Thirst. So if you think about the Lightning Claws, in turn 1, straight away, it's 5 attacks per model, 6 on the Sergeant, so that gives you that same 26. Lightning Claws are -2, so that's the same as the chainsword with the additional bonus from Savage Echoes, and then it's 1 damage as well. However, you would get to reroll wounds. So quite often, I think in my last game I ran like a 5-man squad of Assault Intercessors into other infantry and caused the enemy to take like 13 saves. So you probably do even more because you get to reroll your wounds with Lightning Claws. So you're probably looking at like the squad, if they deep strike in turn 2 before Savage Echoes, they can actually do an insane 15 to 17 wounds maybe against enemy infantry. So when we do get to Savage Echoes, it's then another 1 attack per model and another -1. So at that point, the Lightning Claw guys get 31 attacks and it's -3, re-rolling all their wounds. So that is very scary against any sort of enemy infantry. So our Thunderhammers, they did lose a minus to the AP, so they're -2 now as opposed to the previous -3. We will get that back when we get to Savage Echoes, of course. And then it's 16 attacks, so you'll hit half because you can take the -1 from where using the Thunderhammer. So 16 attacks hitting on 4s, you're going to get 8 hits, and then you're going to wound most things. Anything toughness 7 below on 2s, toughness 8 on 3s. So pretty reliably you're going to be wounding things, and then if we get to Savage Echoes you get another 5 attacks, so you'd be looking at like 10 or 11 Thunderhammers wounding on 2s, yeah. That's going to still cause massive damage against pretty much anything. So they've said that Bladeguard Veterans are first company, and Terminators are first company as well, and they do use leadership of 9 in the first company. I'm a little bit confused because up until now first company had only been Terminators, so in terms of lore I guess the Primaris joining the first company are going to be Bladeguard Veterans, and yeah, I guess it's going to be very hard to shift these models off the board, what with their invulnerable saves, so I don't really think it's very much trouble, 9 leadership. Again, as a Space Marine generally, we shouldn't have to worry too much about that. So in terms of the Bladeguard Veterans, I kind of think maybe running a squad of 5 would be optimal with stratagems, because you could then use transhuman on them for just 1 CP and cause enemy weapons to only wound them on 4s. With an invulnerable save, you're really going to cut down any sort of significant damage to them. 5 is also a nice number in terms of you can put 5 of them in an impulsor, with some sort of character to buff them. So I think that is a really good option for the Bladeguard Veterans. If we think for a second about them being in the Impulsor, the Primaris Lieutenant from Indomitus or the Bladeguard Ancient from Indomitus both seem like good options. The Bladeguard is 85 points, he gives them +1 to hit. The Primaris Lieutenant is also 90 points, so 5 more, he gives them reroll 1 on wounds, which I prefer, I think, because these guys usually wound on 2s, so the reroll 1 on wounds means all your wounds go through. It seems really strong. And then I guess the one difference there as well is the Primaris Lieutenant actually carries a sword as well, which would add to all the attacks, whereas the Bladeguard Ancient just has a pistol. So he is weaker in close combat, and these are guys you want to be in close combat. So if it was up to me, I think I'd pay the extra 5 points and take them with the Primaris Lieutenant. If you haven't seen my video on the Lieutenant, there's loads of options you can do with him. Check it out up here. So in terms of Terminators, they keep Fury of the First, which gives them for 1 CP in the phase, they can add 1 to their hit rolls. So we could add 1 in their shooting phase, or we could add 1 in their close combat phase. Obviously these are just close combat guys, so adding 1 to their hit rolls is pretty significant. I think it's actually probably going to be more significant on the Lightning Claws, just because the sheer number of attacks they get. But when Savage Echoes kicks in turn 3, I could definitely see it might be worth paying it on those Thunderhammers, just to get a few more Thunderhammers through. Especially if you're up against some sort of like Demon Primarch or something, it would definitely give you a bit of an edge. So for the Mathhammer part of the video this week, I thought we'd try something new or a little bit different from last week. Last week we had them fight against each other. Some people didn't like that, felt like it wasn't a great comparison, so this week we're going to fight against 3 enemies, toughness 4, 6 and 8, and then we're going to take damage from 4 different weapons. I think toughness 4, 5, 7 and 8. Okay, so welcome to the Mathhammer part of the video. Bladeguard Vets via Assault Terminators. Here we go then. So our test is going to be 5 Bladeguard Veterans, 35 points a model, so that's 175 points, 21 attacks on the charge. 5 Lightning Claw Terminators, 33 points per model, 26 attacks on the charge. And then 5 Thunderhammer and Storm Shield Terminators, 43 points per model, so 215 points for the squad, 16 attacks on the charge. This week I tried to base the squads on things that made sense, so the reason I picked 5 Bladeguards is that's what fits in Impulsor, and then I guess the 5 and the 5 are the sort of the standard Terminator squads. So, moving on. The enemy models we're going to fight are Toughness 4 Marines, Toughness 6 and Vindicator Warsuits, and then Toughness 6 Tanks, Leviathan Dreads. We're not going to work out the wounds, we're just going to hit these things and see if we get wounds. So, Bladeguard Veterans, 21 attacks, hitting on 3s, gives us 14 hits. That's a strength 5, minus 3 AP, 2 damage, Mastercrafted Power Sword. So, against infantry, we would wound on 2s, so it gives us 12 wounds, 24 damage. Against the medium armour, toughness 6, we would wound on 4s, so because it's just +1 above, unfortunately, strength 5 against toughness 6. So wound on 4s, 7 wounds, 14 damage. Against the heavy armour, it's the same actually, even though because it's not double toughness, again, wounds on 4s, so 7 wounds, 14 damage. Very good across the board, these guys. So Assault Terminators with Lightning Claws. We get 26 attacks, hitting on 3s, so we get 17 hits. Lightning Claws minus 2 AP, 1 damage. Against infantry, we wound on 3s, and then we re-roll our fails, so I actually get 15 wounds, so we do 1 more damage, but I guess it would be 15 saves against 7 saves. So against toughness 2 Marines, I guess, the Bladeguards are kind of just as good, but against any sort of infantry with just toughness 1, wounds 1, then I guess these guys would win because you'd just be slaughtering so many of them, making them do 15 saves. Against the medium armour, then it was going to be wounds on 4s, and that would be 13 wounds, so still fairly decent. However, against the heavy armour, we'd only be wounding on 5s, so you're looking at just 9 wounds. I guess the rerolls still keep these guys sort of competitive. And it's worth saying that none of this is done with the Savage Echoes in mind. This is just in turn 1 and 2, I guess, if we were attacking. So in Savage Echoes, you need to add 5 additional attacks for each of the squads of 5. The Thunderhammers. So it's 16 hits, hitting on 4s like we mentioned earlier, so you just get 8 hits. So against infantry, it would be 7 wounds, potentially 21 damage, so good against high wound infantry, I guess. Really good at clearing 3 wound models off the board, but against any 1 or 2 wound models, then damage is wasted with the Thunderhammer. Against the medium armour, again, very decent, wounding on 2s,
21 damage. That's right up there with the same sort of damage that the Bladeguards were doing. And then against the heavy armour, then these guys would do 15 damage with wounds on 3s. So less hits, but still very competitive on the damage. So then if we want to compare all these together, and I've kind of done green being the best, orange being sort of medium, and red being the worst. But I mean, worst in this sense is not that bad. The Bladeguards do really well against all three. The Terminators do the most damage, but again, the Terminators with Thunderhammers do the most damage, but again, if you weren't hitting things with lots of wounds, then damage would be lost here. And the Lightning Claw guys, sort of consistent across the board, really going to be effective against one wound models, these Lightning Claw guys. I mean, they would, against one wound models, they would be the best. So against enemy infantry, Lightning Claws seems like they're just going to tear through them. Against anything else, I mean, it's still fairly decent against the toughness 6, but against the armour, obviously, I mean, if you're attacking armour with Lightning Claws, you kind of know that you're not in a best situation, but it's still doable. It's still 9 wounds against toughness 8. It's not bad, considering that's not what their weapon's designed for. Okay, so that's the offensive results. Let's move on and look at defensive results. So, similar comparison to what I did a few weeks back for the Sanguinary Guard, we'll look at 10 incoming Melta shots, that's from Devastator Squad. We'll look at 20 incoming Storm Cannon shots from a Leviathan Dreadnought. We'll look at 20 Grav Cannon shots coming in from a Devastator Squad. I mean, I guess if there's a better weapon you could suggest now, because I think the Grav Devastators have kind of been a little bit nerfed maybe, so they're not going to be as common in 9, and then the last one is Hurricane Bolters. So for all these shots, I've used the actual BS of these units as well to calculate in the number of shots, and the reason that I wanted to do this was I really felt like it's important to know if you're getting 10 multi-melta shots in, are you actually going to have to deal with, like, how many saves you're going to have to take from that? So I've used the ballistic skill to work out how many hits. So, Bladeguards, 10 multi-melta shots, 7.3 hits. So they would actually get wounded 6.1 times. So they need to save on 4s. So the result is probably, I've rounded to the nearest number up or down again for this comparison. So they need to save on 4s. So the result is they take 3 wounds, and each wound is d6 damage. I mean, it's horrible, but that's what it is. Against the Storm Cannon shots, so it would be hitting on 2s from a Leviathan Dreadnought, so it's 16 hits, so that makes 10 or 11 wounds here. So saves are 5.5, so the result is 5 wounds for 2 damage. So I guess in this case, a Leviathan Dreadnought shooting them would kill 2 models and take 2 wounds off the 3rd model. So it would take off basically half the squad. And then 20 Grav Cannon shots. We would get 14 hits. We would get 9 wounds. We'd save on 4s again. So I guess again it would do the same 5 wounds. So I mean, it's not that bad. It's still half the squad gone from shooting. And then against Hurricane Bolters, these guys kind of rock up against Hurricane Bolters. I guess 2+ save. They're very, it's just the odd one that's going to slip through. So against bolter shots, these guys are pretty impervious. So let's move on next to the Lightning Claw Terminators. So we know that they're slightly worse armoured in that they've got just the 5+ invulnerable save. So the hits and wounds and everything doesn't change anywhere. All it changes is what they save on. So against the multi-melta, these guys will only save on 5s. So the result is 4 d6 wounds coming through. Against the Storm Cannon, again, these guys would save on 4s because they have the 2-up save, so actually no change here. So 5 2 damage wound comes through. Against the Devastator squads, it's -3, so it would actually only be saves on 5s, so you'd actually lose 3 whole models against the Devastator squad with the Grav. And then bolter shots, very much the same result, just 1 damage through from the bolters. And then our Storm Shields. So, like I mentioned earlier, Storm Shields are a little bit interesting in that you get the 1+ save, but let's look at it in practice. So against the multi-meltas, it makes no difference. You still get 3 wounds, or 3 wounds of d6 damage coming through. Against the Storm Cannon, you would actually save on 3s. So this is the one difference here, because it'd be a 1+ save. So the -2 would put you on 3. So you save on 3s. So against the Storm Cannon, you would take 2 less wounds than the Bladeguards or the Lightning Claw guys. And the Grav Cannon, you would still do the same 4s, so you would still lose 2.5 models. And then against the Bolters, it would just be that 1 wound through, because you're always going to roll some 1s, right? Like, you can't avoid that. So, in terms of defense, The Bladeguard, again, are really right up there. They perform as good as the Terminators with Thunderhammers. The only thing the Terminators with Thunderhammers beat them on is that Storm Cannon shots, and that's that 1+ save that is very situational, only kicks in against -1 and -2 weapons. So in this case, the Terminators is only one guy saved on average, right? So when you're actually on the tabletop and you're actually rolling the dice, you know, the dice go either way. So like, there's nothing in it. Against the Grav, no difference. Against the Bolter, no difference. And you know what? Our Lightning Claw guys do fairly decently, considering they only have a 5+ save. Whereas you'd lose 2.5 models in a couple of situations with the Bladeguard and the Storm Shields, with the Lightning Claws you would lose 3 models, likely, against the Grav. And then, I guess with the multi-meltas, I mean, you're just fishing for 1s and 2s on the wound rolls. There's no rhyme or reason for that. So, you know, you could end up coming out better, you could end up coming out worse. You potentially will lose 4 models with Lightning Claws, where you likely, the maximum you could lose with the Bladeguard and the Storm Shields are 3s. So, I hope that gives you an overview of like how much damage they can do, and then how much damage they can take. And then kind of like I did this last slide to give you a summary of where everything sits, and then we put the point costs for these 5 guys at the bottom. I didn't include the 5 points for the Teleport Homer, so this is just for the squad. So Bladeguard came in like second everywhere, strong at surviving low damage and high damage, strong against weak enemies, strong against heavy enemies. The Lightning Claw guys, obviously they survive low arms fire, no problem. High arms fire and high toughness enemies are a problem, but infantry, these guys will just murder them. They will be the most effective at killing infantry. And then, I mean, people have asked, do we think 2 Lightning Claws on Vanguard Vets are viable? I guess the answer now would be yes. If you're killing infantry, Vanguard Vets will be crazy good at that now. And then Thunderhammer Terminators, obviously really good at surviving low damage. I've given them a 1 here for the best survivability, which they do have, but it's so minute. I think in practice that 1+ save, it only kicks in on very few weapon types. It's going to be so situational. I don't know if it's worth the 35 different odd points. And then against weak damage enemies, Thunderhammer is obviously not meant for weak damage enemies. And against strong damage enemies, I haven't said this is amazing because it's only -2 now, and this sword here is -3. So it's kind of, if your enemy is a 4+ invulnerable save, then your Thunderhammer is going to be your best option, right? Because the -2 will put it on a 4+, and then it's 3 damage a pop. But if your enemy doesn't have an invulnerable save, then your Bladeguard will probably be the best option. And then the Bladeguard is like 35 points cheaper for the 5-man squad, so you could basically get a whole other model there to put in an impulsor, or you could have a character with them to buff them in the impulsor. So, yeah, I mean, all 3 squads, I think, have use on the battlefield now. All 3 squads are fairly survivable. I think what we got to do is we got to get some Terminators on the board and try them in one of the upcoming battle reports and see, do they perform.
So we find ourselves in a pretty interesting position. The Bladeguard Veterans are super competitive for the points they cost. Just delivering them to battle is the issue. If you do put them in the Impulsor, it does push their points up quite a lot. They can have a buff character in there with them, or I guess as in Blood Angels, maybe you could even have Mephiston in there once we get our Sanguinary Discipline back. So lots of options around the Bladeguard Veterans, and a very competitive unit for us. So I think in turn 3, the Thunderhammer Terminators are going to be disgusting, as with the Lightning Claw Terminators. If people are using infantry to hold backfield objectives, we could definitely drop a Terminator squad down and just wipe them out. Maybe save some CP for that reroll on the charge, or there's the new commanding oratory stratagem that lets you cast a litany at any point, so you can maybe drop down like a chaplain with them, cast the litany Canticle of Hate, so it's only 7, and then you could almost guarantee that charge and just clear out some battlefield objectives. If they do, leave the chaplain there to hold the objective, pick up the squad with the Teleport Homer, bring them down somewhere else a turn later or something. The Terminators, I think there's definitely room for them. I think I'm going to try and work them into one of my upcoming lists fairly soon. I mean, the other interesting thing is Terminators don't need to be in squads of 5. They could be in a squad of 10. I mean, you've got a Death Ball in the making right there. I mean, Dante could even drop in with them with, you know, Death from Above. supposed to drop in something else that lets them reroll charge, like a banner bearer with Icon of the Angel. And yeah, I mean, it's a different tactic than what we've normally seen, but could be very, very strong. Now, there's obviously a lot to get into this video, so what I would love to do is if you guys comment down below and let us know, let me know and let all the other Blood Angels fans know what you think, what you're going to run and why. Because, I mean, everyone's struggling to build 9th edition lists, especially with us not having our book yet. I think in previous weeks I've had 1 or 2 list submissions to review on the live stream on Sunday. This week I think I've had 7, so unless the live stream is going to be 5 hours long, we're probably just going to have to put some people into a queue. So yeah, definitely leave me a comment down below though. We try and answer every single one, and thank you so much for hanging out with us this week on the Tactics video. As always, the live stream is at 4 on Sunday, so if you've got any other questions, please come hang out. You're very welcome to join us there. I really hope I'll see you in the next one. By the blood are we made. Peace.